Hot.
Very hot. Top temperature today was 105.
That's not real hot.
Okay.
Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
Today we're going to talk about tomatoes and tomato performance.
At the beginning of the season, we said we had a bunch of tomatoes that we were experimenting with this year, and we were going to keep you guys posted on how things went. Initially, we talked about germination rates and, transplants and stuff like that. And now we've seen a little bit of production. Now, we've also seen one of the hottest summers we've ever seen here. One of the windiest summers when combined with the heat. We have seen it this bad before, but not in a while. Then we got a really nice hailstorm the other day, which beat the living tar out of a lot of stuff.
So remember that we have tomatoes planted in 4 different places on our homestead.
On purpose.
We have a straw bale bed next to our greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
We have Dutch bucket tomatoes in the greenhouse. We have another straw bale bed down here in our regular garden. And then we have a bunch of tomatoes planted in the soil.
Right, in raised beds. So we wanted to look at them all because we're trying to basically test them. We were joking earlier about the fact that you can't look at the weather forecast and say, oh, it's going to be, 2021 is going to have another one of those 2 months of searing heat with high winds, so we need to plant particularly stocky plants that are wind resistant and also, you don't get that kind of forecast. Our goal is to pick plants for next year and future years.
Our results will be different from yours.
Right.
Because your growing conditions will be different. Ours are uniquely extreme.
Yes.
We have high wind being above 35 miles an hour on a pretty ongoing basis this year for
2 months.
A couple of months.
Yeah.
A lot of heat, a lot of drying. I don't think we got above 15% relative humidity except for our 0.23 inches of rain.
Right. When it sprinkles, and it's not even enough to register on the weather station, all it does is turn into a sauna. So instantly you're up to 40% humidity, which lasts for 20 minutes and then goes away.
Now, how many tomato varieties do we have?
15.
15. Part of these varieties we were growing because we had a failure last year. We wanted to see how they tasted. We had some heirloom varieties that we were given that we have some interesting results from, but we also have a bunch of hybrid tomatoes that we're growing.
Right, and I usually grow something like a regular Roma, which is a non-hybrid, it's a traditional tomato. But then I'm not afraid to grow F1s too.
So F1s are just a hybrid?
They're just a hybrid. They're not a GMO. It just means that you took 2 plants that had good characteristics, pollinated one with the other, and that's your F1.
Qualitatively, how would you say that the straw bale by the greenhouse, the straw bale in the yard, and then the tomatoes in the raised beds did in comparison to the greenhouse?
Well, far and above the greenhouse is a more protected environment.
And that's really key for us.
That's very key for us. My conclusion is so far, and obviously it ain't over till it's over, so far, the Paisanos in the greenhouse have produced the best in the greenhouse, with the second in line being the Gardener's Delight cherry tomato. Both done extremely well. The cherry tomato puts on huge trusses of cherry tomatoes where you'll have literally a dozen tomatoes on one truss, and then they ripen kind of sequentially down the truss, and superb. Just a really sweet, delicious, hard to get them back into the house because you want to eat them right there.
Now, we had a beefsteak tomato in the
There's a big beef in there, and it is full of tomatoes that are that big.
Now, we also had a heirloom. It was an Amanda orange that we got from CB at CB's Greenhouse and Garden,
Right.
which turned out to be a really nice tasting tomato.
Right, it's delicious. We pulled it out of the greenhouse.
Well, we had some blight problems in the greenhouse.
Right.
And that particular variety also seems to have some blight problems in the soil garden. Now keep in mind, we don't have a lot of moisture here, so
No.
I don't think it could
We
be
have
just
we have one Amanda orange in the straw bales over
Right.
here. We have another one in the center raised bed. No, in the bed next to that center raised bed. And so that's the soil. And then we had the one in the greenhouse. So we did this on purpose because we want to see whether certain environments are better than others for these plants. My conclusion is I would consider growing Amanda orange again. We pulled the Amanda orange out of the greenhouse. We're now growing it outside the greenhouse. So I water the Dutch buckets every day. And the plants are actually resprouting and seem to be fine.
Now,
We'll see.
the Amanda orange was a really vigorous, really hardy vine to start with.
Yeah.
It was
nice and sturdy.
It was probably one of the best vines that we had in the greenhouse at the time.
In the long run, they were all doing about the same.
Yeah, the greenhouse has been doing great guns when it comes to tomato production.
Right.
So what would you say the number one producer is for us in our current circumstances, and where in the gardening sphere is it producing well?
The number one producer in the greenhouse is obviously Pisano, with number two being Gardener's Delight, which is a cherry. The most productive outside of the greenhouse is by far Inca.
Right.
It's a heavy paste tomato, but it also had the most problems with blossom end rot. There were no Incas in the greenhouse at all, just in the straw bales and in the dirt.
Right.
All of them had the same problem, whether it was straw bale or dirt. They all had blossom end rot. As soon as they were sprayed, fine. They're really heavy producers. And that's what I was hoping for with them. They were listed as being, I mean, they produced these monster, I mean, the fruit is simply heavy. Very dense, not a lot of water to it. So when you go to make sauce, it's like pulp already. So it's awesome that way. You're not having to boil down a lot of water and waste all your time doing that kind of stuff. Steam up the house some more, like you need to steam anything.
So
these days.
we're really at mid-season for us for tomato production.
Right.
And we were out looking at one part of our soil raised bed garden last night, and we decided there's some varieties that are just going to go as soon as we start having some tomatoes come off.
Right. Alaskan Fancy is the first one that's going to go.
Now we planted that because it should have produced the first tomatoes
Yes.
by a lot.
Yes. Well, in fairness, a few of these tomatoes that didn't do all that hot in terms of production were attacked by squirrels.
Yep, that's true.
We should have had one of the first ripe tomatoes off Alaskan Fancy, but the squirrel ran off with it.
Yeah, but then the squirrel got a necklace and
Right.
It's gone.
It's gone. The reason I decided to try it was it's supposed to be 55 days to maturation.
and we're way past 55 days.
And we're getting a dribble of fruit. It's setting fruit that's 2 inches in diameter in
Right.
general. It's obviously a determinate plant based on the size. It was listed as being a determinate, which is fine. That's why I planted them where I did, because that's an area I didn't want tall things in. So they were right about the determinate part. The production, it just doesn't like the heat here. It's too much for it. The tomatoes are fine. They taste fine.
Yeah, I thought they tasted pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty decent. And as I told Henry when we tasted the first one that we actually got off that wasn't stolen, I said, you know, if this had really come at 55 days, it would have been spectacular. Because you
Right.
know how when you're just drooling waiting for that first tomato and you finally get it, it doesn't have to be the perfect, the penultimate tomato at that point. It is perfect by virtue of the fact that it's your ripe tomato. Ravello, it's an indeterminate. I know I've grown it before, and I just felt like it hasn't performed well this year. It's not billed as a grape tomato, and yet, at least the stuff I read wasn't billing it that way, but that's really what it is. They're tasty, they're moderately productive, but if I'm going to put that much effort into a plant, I'll do a San Marzano or something else that's going to give me something bigger.
Yeah.
The Incas, I would definitely plant again, but we know up front we have to spray them heavily in order to keep them from getting blossom end rot.
With calcium chloride.
With calcium chloride.
You know, that's to make up for the trouble around here of getting calcium uptake into the plant.
Right. We have extremely alkaline soil, and the problem with extremely alkaline soil is there's all this calcium sitting there that the plant can't touch. It's all bound up because of the lack of acidity. And it's, you know, so the plant is sitting there going, calcium, you know. Meanwhile, it's sitting in a pile of calcium, but it can't take it up. And you could water till the cows come home. Unless you're watering with acid, it's not going to be able to do anything about it. So you have to simply augment, and we've done that, and things have gone well now. Opalka has also been a heavy producer. I think one of the reasons, I know that a lot of people have said Opalka they were very happy with. It's an indeterminate. The Incas are not indeterminate. They're a determinate plant, so they're smaller. Roma has not done well this year, and I'm thinking it was kind of one of those things where I did a Roma again. I've had some years where Roma was extremely successful.
Right.
But I think I'm going to probably eliminate that from my list too. Pisano in the greenhouse is spectacular.
Yeah, the fruit on the Pisano is really large. It's heavy. You know, it looks by far to be the biggest fruit that we're growing for paste tomatoes.
For paste tomatoes, definitely. Granadero normally does really well for me. It's normally a heavy producer in the field, and that's the way it's billed. Production has been okay. Not as good as I would have hoped. Carbon.
We haven't had any come off yet.
We haven't had any come off yet. They just keep getting bigger.
They're going to take over the world.
They're going to take over the world. But I have got multiple fruits out there that are huge.
Right.
Way bigger than my fist. I mean, they're huge. And they're obviously going to be impressive when they get there. They just haven't gotten there yet.
When we planted out those tomatoes, they were a bit bigger than what we'd planned because it was cold.
It was too cold to plant out.
We had freezing weather right when these tomatoes should have gone out, and we stopped because it was going to freeze. And we had a couple of 3 or 4 days of freezing weather.
Mm-hmm. And then we went straight from freezing to 90 degrees.
And
high winds.
And high winds. So the plants that are outside have been abused pretty heavily.
Oh yeah, but that's, I mean, if you want to get technical about it, what better test?
So if you were having to call it right now, which varieties would plant again next year, based on what we've seen happen up to right now, and assuming all the fruit ripen,
right? What
would you choose?
Well, the greenhouse is going to be Pisano,
right?
Probably 1, maybe 2 big beef. Gardener's Delight in the greenhouse. The Bella Rosa that we tried this year has not produced anything yet. It was really decimated by the squirrel, and the squirrel hit that end of the bed really badly and wiped out a couple of mortgage lifters and a Bella Rosa. They'd come back, which is saying something, because they were down to sticks when the squirrel was done with them. And one of them, and the Bella Rosa's got a fruit on it. It's a pretty sturdy looking plant. Mortgage Lifter has done the same thing. Homestead is another one that has managed to cling to the to life and is producing fruit. We haven't tasted it yet though.
Now if you look at the 4 growing locations, the most stunted plants we have are in the straw bale bed by the greenhouse.
Right.
And I believe that's in part due to water. That area is unprotected from the wind, and it lines up with
the predominant wind.
Yeah. And that wind just wails on it in a major league fashion.
Right.
So I think that
that was a lot of it.
I think a large part was that those plants were just getting desiccated by the hot, dry wind.
A couple people have asked me how much I prune my tomatoes and stuff like that, and I will take off dead, disease, dying,
right?
The 3 Ds, just to control disease, basically. But other than that, I don't, because like when we had this hailstorms, some years you don't get any, or you get super minimal, almost no damage.
Some years you get a real slug of them.
I have seen a year several years ago when I lost 3/4 of my tomato crop because I had trellised it up and I had pruned the plants. And what that taught me was, if I'm going to do that, I have to have shade cloth over the top to protect them.
Which we're out of this year, so.
Right, and you can't touch it anywhere local. I mean, the big box stores we're out of it by April.
April, yeah. One of the advantages of letting them grow kind of wild, you stake them up when they're young, but then you kind of let them go. That keeps shade.
Well, it
on
shades the
ground.
fruit. It does make it harder to spot your tomato hornworms and stuff. And unfortunately, our flashlight died. If you guys don't know about it, one of the coolest things to do if you're having tomato hornworm problems is get a special flashlight.
Get a UV flashlight.
It's a UV flashlight. In Arizona, they're fairly commonly sold because they're used for hunting for
Scorpions. Yeah.
That white zigzag on the side of a tomato hornworm looks like a piece of neon. So it makes it super easy to just shine it on the plants, and it's like this neon light. You know exactly where they are, and you can grab them right off there.
Let's see. So far, we've put up 3 weeks worth of tomato sauce for our pizzas.
Yeah, really. Yeah. So that's kind of where we stand right now. I mean, we have not gotten fruit off of some of these to taste them yet.
I'm thinking if I can get the hydroponic nutrient solution under control this summer, that next summer I'm really wanting to grow most, if not all, of our paste tomatoes in the greenhouse.
I think that makes total sense. The vermin problems in there are usually a little bit less. You know, we don't at least have to worry about squirrels running off with them.
Yeah, squirrels and mice and rats and...
Right. And birds pecking on things and stuff like that, although we don't have that problem here too much in the summer.
There's a whole lot of things going on in the homestead. We've tried a whole bunch of new varieties that we've been trying for a couple of years that we're actually here and we can get something off so we can make some informed decisions.
If you have any specific questions about either any of the varieties that we've mentioned or some variety that you're considering growing, or, you know, an issue you've had with a plant, I've grown enough types now that I could, because this is not the first year of growing a million types, that I can tell you which ones, for instance, I've had trouble with lavender rot.
Is there anything else you want to say about our experience with tomatoes so far this year?
Well, they're coming on. We've managed one small batch of sauce. We've eaten a bunch of tomatoes. Lots and lots of little cherry tomatoes and stuff like that have disappeared magically.
Shh, you're not supposed to tell people that.
We're not getting a bountiful crop at this point. We have a lot of paste tomatoes that are within a week of coming off.
I hope you had some fun listening to our
Rant
talking,
and rave, yes.
Yeah, well, our discussion about our experiences this summer with tomatoes so far. If you liked it, definitely hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And remember to tap that bell so you get notifications when we publish something new, because we're always doing something new on the homestead.
Right, and like I say, if you have questions about specific varieties, don't hesitate to ask. If I've grown them, I'll let you know what I know about them.
Do you know what time it is, Irene?
Time to shut this thing down and make dinner.
What an excellent idea. Say goodbye, Irene.
Goodbye, Irene.
Talk with you later.
Bye.
I have a lot of pickles to eat.
Yes, it's his job.
She doesn't like pickles.
I don't like pickles.
She doesn't eat pickles.
I don't eat pickles.
She does eat sauerkraut, though.
Yes, I do.